Hello, ladies. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It is late evening here, 6:15. What time is it over there?
10:15 in the morning.
Ooh, so too early for a whiskey. Too early, is it? Or
A
is
little
it?
bit early, maybe. Some coffee.
Maybe, yeah. Um, okay, we will start off with I don't know who wants to go first, but do you want to say a little bit about yourself and your backgrounds?
Well, I'm Wendelin, and I grew up in Germany, and moved to the US for college. I studied in New York, and then went on to move to LA, where I just kind of by chance stumbled into the entertainment industry. And then Anna, who's my cousin, she was already working in entertainment, and then we started working together and spent amazing 10 years working together, or more than 10 years actually. Um, and yeah, and then like Anna already said, then at some point we got a crazy idea to start a whiskey company, and here we are.
Yeah, and I'm Anna, and I also actually grew up in Germany. And I went to university in London and lived there for quite some time, and then ended up in LA for initially for work. And thought I would be here for about a year, and then I got stuck in a really good way. And yeah, and worked in film and worked in music, ended up working with together with Wendelin. So when we decided to venture out into a different space and start a whiskey brand, we already had, not only are we family, but we also had over a decade of collaborating and working together under our belt. So it felt like a really easy choice to make to start something new together.
Okay, and so tell us a little bit about Lodestar Whiskey.
Well, it's a blend of a high rye bourbon and American single malt. It drinks like a bourbon. So you've got those familiar caramel notes kind of up front, and then the high rye content adds a really nice backbone, and gives it more complexity and spice, which works really well in cocktails. And then the American single malt adds a really nice rounded finish, that's unexpected. And it is a bit of an unusual blend. There's not a whole lot of products out there that blend an American single malt with a high rye bourbon. So when we were kind of coming up with the flavor brief, we thought a lot about who was going to consume the whiskey and how they would consume the whiskey, and it became really important to us that it was had to be versatile. We wanted it to work really well just on its own, and not water down too quickly if you added a rock to it. So it is bottled at 90 proof, but we also wanted it to be really approachable and something that maybe a person that was newer to whiskey would be inclined to drink. So it needed to be really smooth. And then, we love cocktails, and like Anna already said, we love tinkering with flavors, and so we wanted a product that would work well in a cocktail.
So, how did you end up with a whiskey brand?
Wendelin and I are cousins. We come from a big family of people who love to sit around a big dinner table and share yummy food and drinks. And so that was kind of our family background a little bit. And then we ended up working together for over a decade in the entertainment industry. And we worked in music, in artist management, and some label work. We also worked in film. We kind of wore many different hats, traveled a lot for work. And during that time, we developed a love for whiskey, which in the music world that we were in was kind of the drink of choice. And over time, also realized that we didn't feel very represented in the whiskey space. Walking up to a bar, we, kind of over time developed our palates and knew what we liked and what we didn't like. But we're hard pressed to find a brand that we felt we could identify with, or a lot of people that we knew could identify with. And so over time, this little passion and idea started brewing, but we were busy in our careers and, life just happened. And then the pandemic hit and everything in entertainment stopped. And we looked at each other and just decided to pivot and to follow this passion of whiskey. And we spent a long time learning about whiskey making and just, educating ourselves and figuring out how to get in a bottle what we had in mind as far as flavor profile goes. And, coming up with a brand that we felt is more inclusive and invites a new consumer into the space. So that's kind of a little bit of background in how Lodestar was initially born.
When we just kind of started really developing a love for whiskey, we also realized that wherever we would go and order a whiskey at the bar, it would elicit some sort of reaction, some positive, some negative, and that just seemed strange to us, because if you order a tequila or a vodka as a woman, you don't get the same reaction. And so we felt like that's really interesting. Where does that come from? And then when we looked at the space as a whole, we realized that that whiskey really was still being predominantly marketed as a man's drink. But we knew so many women who loved whiskey. And so we were like, well, maybe it has something to do with branding and marketing. And since we both have backgrounds in that as well, we just figured that that might be a good way to put our skills to use in a different arena, so to speak.
So at no point did you think wine, beer, gin, vodka, tequila, whiskey was always the drink for you guys?
It was, and it's such an interesting product because it's kind of alive, right? Like it changes and every barrel is different, and so many things go into creating the flavor that you end up with in a bottle. And so I think that was also something that really intrigued us about whiskey and that what we found so fascinating. It's different than other spirits. And coming again, this is like a very personal part of our background, but our family and just we all grew up in the kitchen cooking and loving just experimenting with flavors. And so I think that was probably part of the driver that drove us to whiskey rather than, let's say, a gin or a vodka. It's just a more, I would say, a more interesting and more complex spirit.
Okay, then. So you've got this kind of idea, in your mind that you wanted to create a whiskey. So then how do you go about that? How is that done?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we took our time learning. We went to countless distilleries and just visited distilleries to learn, about the process of whiskey making. To try different whiskeys. We knew from the get-go what we liked in a whiskey and what we wanted, the flavors we kind of wanted to combine in this product that we wanted to create, but we didn't initially know how to do that. We knew what we wanted, but not how to get it in a bottle, basically. And so we spent a lot of time just kind of, like I said, traveling to distilleries, educating ourselves, meeting people, talking to people. And we ended up initially working with a master blender who helped us kind of navigate how to bring those flavors to the forefront. And we realized quickly that blending was the way to go. It was important to us to create something that didn't have any additives, and we didn't want anything other than a very kind of simple and clear components in there. And so we kind of followed this direction of high rye bourbon and American single malt. And it actually happened fairly quickly then, once we knew those two things were what we were going for. And then we just, tried around with sampling and figuring out exactly, the blend, and kind of caught a little bit of the blending bug as we were doing it, because it's such a creative process. You just have endless possibilities, basically. But yeah, that's how it happened. We initially, collaborated with a master blender, and then through that process learned so much, and then eventually Wendelin started just blending herself at the kitchen table.
It was during lockdown, so did you get a chance to travel, or was this online, or what was the process? How did that work?
So it was like we started online, which was also incredible. We were just like, who can we talk to? And emailed a lot of people, and then kind of put together our list and made our road trip, so to speak. But it was really incredible how open people in the industry were. That was a surprise for us, especially coming from entertainment and from music, where that industry tends to be more guarded. So that was a really lovely discovery that people were very willing to meet with us and answer our questions. And yeah, it was a cool experience.
So, you traveled down, was it Kentucky that you guys went to? Was that the area, or was it somewhere else, all over?
Really all
We
over
kind
the
of went
country.
all over the place. Yeah, we went to Texas. We went to that whole Bourbon Belt area. We went to Indiana. We ended up actually in the Northwest as well, like all over the place. Mhm.
Yeah. East Coast too.
Mhm.
So I take it that that sort of experience, that was, what was that experience like, basically? Did that must have like built the fire up in you to kind of say, oh, we could do this, we could do that. There must have been so many great opportunities there.
Yeah, for sure. And it was kind of like we were entering this new space that we didn't know that much about. So it was exciting for sure. And it was like you said, it kind of kept lighting the fire under us. And I don't know. It was an exciting time, because every trip, everything, like something new came up, and it was like this massive puzzle we were trying to put together, and every time we found another piece, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I feel too like our whole um I guess like spark that we wanted to do something different and to create a product that was for a more diverse consumer. It was like every time we were meeting with different people, it was like our theory was being confirmed to us. People were really excited about what our ideas and what we were trying to do. And it really felt like, you know what, there is a need for a brand like ours and a product like ours in the market. And that was exciting.
It's always great when you try to do something and then you're telling people and they don't look at you like you have two heads. You know what I mean? Like, oh, somebody gets it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And somebody's willing to kind of go with you on this journey. That is really good. And so talk to me about the label, the design, what's going on, what was the kind of thoughts behind that?
Um, yeah, so when we first started thinking about a brand, and it was during COVID, which we were acutely aware of, like everybody else, of the fact that we were missing community and we were missing getting together with people. And so that was really an important part for us in conceptualizing the brand, was this needs to be about community. About bringing people together, about shared experiences, about something that is approachable in flavor, but also in price point, so that people can, easily share this with each other. So community was something that kept coming up and was just so on top of our minds. And there were a couple of other things that kept coming up of what something, if we're going to put something out in the world, it has to kind of stand for something. And for, inclusivity was another one, because we wanted to make the space more inclusive. That was our initial kind of inspiration and driver for all of this. And then joy was another one. And so we kept coming back to these things that were so important to us in life in general and in creating the brand. And they became these things that we kind of navigated by as we were thinking about the brand and conceptualizing it. And so the word Lodestar, which is a navigational star, like the North Star is a lodestar, and it has another meaning, which is a person or a principle that serves as a guide. It just seemed like a fitting name for how we came up with the whole thing in the first place. And then we looked it up and it was available. And so that was a big surprise. So we went with the name. And then as far as the design, I don't know, Wendelin, if you want to speak to kind of the bottle and the design.
We thought about that as well. We were like, okay, we want something that feels more modern and fresh, but also we didn't want to completely depart from the history of whiskey. So that was something we thought about. And then we had a lot of different ideas that we kind of compiled together. And then we ended up finding a wonderful designer here in LA. Her name is Sheila Buchanan, and she collaborated with us in coming up with the design. And she really understood what we were going for, and it's reflected in the bottle.
Okay, so there's a theme here as well, that you're saying that as well as, you know, the creativity and you guys wanting to have a whiskey brand and that creativity, there's also a story about empowerment and diversity and opening up the space for other people to come into as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's how we felt, right, as whiskey consumers before we ever thought about creating a whiskey ourselves, was that again, there weren't very many brands that were marketing to women. And also to maybe slightly younger consumer, a lot of it felt, the marketing or the imagery felt a little bit dusty to us. And while there are obviously amazing whiskey brands out there, it just felt like the marketing is lagging behind the potential consumer that's out there.
I think the thing is, when somebody says diversity, sometimes people get a little bit scared by the word. Whereas if you were to say, "Oh, there's a diverse range of options," people don't get, people are not, offended or upset by that. But really, what you're doing is you're giving people more ranges of options than just the same 5 from the same 5 big companies. You're giving a space for people to have choice and to choose.
Exactly. And we experience this almost on a daily basis. We do a lot of events to still kind of, introduce people to the brand. And we experience this so often where people walk up who haven't tried whiskey before and they say, oh, I'm not a whiskey drinker. It's not for me. And they've just made that decision in their mind without ever having really tried whiskey a lot of the time. They just don't feel they connect with what whiskey stands for or the image that it represents in our collective minds. And then by 2 women serving it, which is slightly unexpected, bringing us, saying this is our brand and we created this, and then them trying it maybe in a cocktail or even just on the rocks and being pleasantly surprised because it goes counter to what they think this whole product is about. That's something we experience all the time. And that's exactly the reason we wanted to get into this is, there's just a a lot of preconceived notions out there about what this product is and who it's for. And we wanted to disrupt that basically and say it's actually for everybody. If you're of drinking age and you like spirits, then there's no reason why you shouldn't like whiskey.
Yeah, I think so. It's to kind of piggyback off of what Anna said. It's when people come up to us and they say, "Oh, no, I don't I don't like whiskey, or I don't drink just straight whiskey." I'm like, "Well, what makes you think you have to drink it straight?" Right? But it's the image. It's the image of the older white man that, your grandfather, your dad, or whatever, and who's drinking whiskey neat, and that's the way you have to consume it, because also, of course, there's such an artistry to the craft of distilling whiskey. I think that a lot of people feel like they have to know a lot about it, have to be a connoisseur. And then you have to savor it just on its own. And while there are a lot of products out there like that, and they're wonderful and delicious, not all whiskey has to be like that. And you can have a delicious and approachable whiskey that you can drink however you choose and kind of have it just be uncomplicated. Um, and especially living in Southern California, and the home of our brand being in LA, where a lot of people drink tequila or mezcal. Those are both very strong flavored spirits. They have a lot of character. And so if you like that, there's really no reason why the complexity of whiskey wouldn't be something that you could also enjoy. Um, so yeah, it's a lot about changing hearts and minds.
Why do you think that women have not been involved in whiskey or drink whiskey as much, do you think, in the States?
Because they're not marketed to by the brands that are out there.
And
Yeah, they're not
I mean,
spoken to, I think. And it's not
yeah,
just women. I think it's also, a lot of, I don't know,
younger.
I feel that we meet a lot of younger men as well who are not necessarily interested in an overly gendered brand in general. And so, yeah, I just feel when people aren't when people aren't spoken to by the marketing, then they assume it's not for them.
And you can drink it on its own, but also in cocktails. So, do you want to talk about some of the cocktails that you've got?
Yeah, sure. We have a bunch of cocktails recipes that we post on our website and our socials, lodestarwhiskey.com. And we tend to gravitate towards more like lighter and refreshing cocktails, because we feel, first of all, they're delicious, and second of all, again, it's a more of an unexpected application of whiskey. And one of our signature cocktails is the Lodestar iced tea. And it has Lapsang Souchong tea in it, which is a smoky black tea, just some lemon, the whiskey, and then we garnish it with a fresh orange peel. And the Lapsang Souchong actually was inspired by Anna's dad, because that was a tea that he drank every morning. And when Anna was younger, she was like, "Oh my God, that's so smoky. Whoa, I don't like that." But then as you age and your palate develops, and we were drinking a lot of whiskey, and we were thinking about, what's a fun cocktail, like an maybe like an Arnold Palmer, but with whiskey, and then bringing in that smokiness from that tea pairs really, really well with the rye in our blend. Yeah, and it's just a really well balanced and refreshing cocktail, and it's been a big hit so far, so that's great.
So yeah, so just wondering if there's like for a person who's new to whiskey, and new to Lodestar as well, is there an entry point cocktail that you think would help them kind of, develop that interest?
Well, for me, the first whiskey that I learned to love was Jameson. And the way that I drank that was with really spicy ginger beer and lots of fresh lime. And I think Lodestar is delicious with ginger beer and lime. So it's a really easy cocktail that if you like ginger too, it pairs really wonderfully with whiskey.
I've always loved whiskey just on the rocks. So I think that's, if it's a smooth and fairly approachable whiskey like Lodestar is, then that's a good way to kind of start really figuring out the flavors that are in there. But obviously cocktails are amazing and they can, like Wendelin mentioned earlier, we like to come up with cocktails with recipes that are a little bit lighter maybe and not your typical, while I love an old fashioned, but that's, a lot of people when they think whiskey cocktail, they think an old fashioned or a Manhattan. And those are obviously more spirit forward. So on our website, actually, we have a bunch of cocktail recipes that are probably a good entry for people into the world of whiskey, like the iced tea. We have a lemonade. We have some seasonal cocktails for the winter that are really lovely as well. So yeah, I don't know. If people are curious, I would send them to those recipes.
Are there any plans for, any other lines, or are you just trying to push this one at the moment?
We're really focused on this one expression initially. We want to keep it simple and kind of, get this out there. And again, also in as far as flavor and price point, it's like it's a whiskey you can have on your bar at home and just, it's a drink you can share with everybody. It's uncomplicated in a way. We are really excited about doing another expression at some point. We don't have a concrete timeline yet, but we are really interested in finding, really interesting barrels that maybe wouldn't necessarily end up in this blend, but doing some limited releases with really interesting barrels that we can find and yeah, kind of expanding on the idea of Lodestar. But yeah, we're not quite there yet, but it's in the works in our minds for sure.
And you're in California at the moment. Is there any plans for world domination? Are we gonna see it in London at any point, or what's happening there?
We hope so. Southern California is a massive market. And so we want to we're in a bunch of really great restaurants and bars around here and currently in independent retail stores. We want to expand further in this Southern California market before we kind of go to the next thing. The next thing would be another state in the US. And so we're not in a rush. We want to build the brand really organically with a really strong foundation and strong relationships. But eventually we would love to come over to Europe for sure.
What is the bar scene like in California?
We have a great craft cocktail scene here. I mean, just some really, really great mixologists coming up with really exciting flavors in their drinks. Yeah, we're just really incredibly excited to be out and about in LA, meeting those people and making those connections, and being inspired by those people too. We've had some people come up with some really, really interesting creations with our whiskey, and it's always fun to try new things and see where people's mind goes when they try Lodestar and how they incorporate it into their recipes.
So in the States, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because you don't sell throughout this country. You have to sell from state to state. So how is that kind of going? How is it tough? The drinks industry in America. Give me a kind of insight into how that is.
We have the 3-tier system here in the US, and that is a post-prohibition holdover. And it is tough because there's a lot more hoops that you have to jump through, and all of the licensing and the permitting and making sure you're compliant and all that stuff. It's a lot of extra things that you have to take into consideration when you're launching a brand. And I actually have met people and made friends in the spirit space that have brands in Europe, and they always are like, "Oh my God, we can't believe, how do you guys do it?" So yeah, it's a little bit of an extra hoop you have to jump through.
It also definitely poses challenges for smaller and emerging brands to break through because of the three-tier system, where it makes it very challenging to get your brand out and there's just big industry behemoths, so to say, as far as distribution goes, and it just makes it harder to be able to get your product out there when you're not one of the really big brands, basically. So it's an added challenge, but also an added reason why more brands need to be out there, because otherwise the selection and the people that are spoken to is fairly narrow.
The pandemic, the world recession, there's so many things at the moment that's really hitting the hospitality community really, really hard. Is there anything that you think local government over there can do to help you guys out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been, when I moved to LA, the food and beverage scene here was just kind of emerging. And then it like exploded, and we have really some of the best restaurants and bars, and just the whole hospitality community. There's so much talent and so many wonderful people that work in the field. And so to see so many restaurants just post-COVID struggle and have to close is really heartbreaking. And I think from what we've learned is that a lot of it does have to do with kind of roadblocks that the local government put in people's ways. You basically have to rent a space and in your location and have it available, and even without opening. So during the whole permitting process, you already have to be paying rent on a space, and the overheads are just so insane that it just kind of puts bars and restaurants they start out in a deficit, so to speak, and so it just becomes incredibly hard to make that up. And while like we're out and about all the time here in LA, and bars and restaurants seem really full, but it's still like, I think making up that deficit from the get-go is just kind of a hard way to start.
I'm just going to add that the recent fires here in LA also have added to the difficulty of places staying open. Unfortunately, a lot of people just didn't go out for a while, and so it has had quite a big impact on the local economy, and especially on bars and restaurants. But like you said earlier, what your experience was with the drink space, and this has been our experience as well, that the hospitality industry is just there's a really lovely openness to it, and people supporting each other. And we experience that every day, that people are helping each other out, and it's inclusive in a way, because the vibe is there's space for everybody. We don't need to compete with each other and put each other down, basically. So that's been really lovely, and that's also been really apparent in this aftermath of the fires here.
On a positive note, I see that you have won some awards already. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, I mean, we were just excited that we've done well at the competitions that we've entered. We've gotten a lot of really great feedback. Not only did we win a bunch of gold medals or platinum medals, but just kind of the tasting feedback that we've received from the judges at those uh, competitions has been really positive and has again like reconfirmed our whole reason for being and that it's really approachable and that it's unusual but still really drinkable. So yeah, that's just been it's been fun to have that reconfirmed by people in the industry.
Is there a way that, like, how did you, obviously you learned about it like from a taste perspective through your work originally, but what's a way that you think that women should approach or can approach the world of whiskey to better educate themselves?
Well, there's a really wonderful organization called Women Who Whiskey. It's free to join, and that's a great resource. They're a worldwide organization. Uh, we only know some of the chapters here in the US, but we've heard that they do events all over the world, and put on events, and you can buy tickets to the events, and they invite really interesting and cool brands to come out and tell you more about their products. So that's a really wonderful way. Um, I think there's also a lot of resources online. There's some great other female-owned, female-led whiskey brands out there. They often have, resources on their website or just like us do interviews and tastings, etc., online that you could probably find on YouTube. Um, yeah, and then I think also probably just like find a couple of your gal friends that are equally as curious and then just go out there and start drinking some whiskey.
So a little bit of a different question. If you could share a glass of Lodestar with anybody past or present, who would it be and why?
For me, it's very personal. My parents aren't around anymore, and my dad loved a good whiskey sour. And so I would have a whiskey sour with my dad if I could have a cocktail with anybody.
I would probably, like I said, I grew up in Germany, which is really, really far away from where I grew up. And I still have a lot of really close friends and family over there. So if I could just snap my fingers and have a Lodestar cocktail with someone, it would probably be with my girlfriends back home.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me. Would you like to say again where people can buy Lodestar Whiskey?
So they can, on our website, it has all the places that we're in, all the bars and restaurants and the liquor stores, the retailers as well. And then throughout the US, people can also order it online on lodestarwhiskey.com. So we do ship to
Most
most states. Mm-hmm.